Guys, welcome back. I think it's recording. I'm going to talk to you guys today about the circle of the 12 houses. And I kind of have outlined the 4 different important aspects of it. The 4 different parts of it that most people focus on and talk about. Like the rising sign, which is also known as the ascendant of your astrology chart, birth chart. The IC, also known, well, there's a few names for it. The Imam Coli, I think it's pronounced, and the beginning of the 4th house. There's the descendant, it's also very rarely known as the falling sign, and the midheaven, or the MC. The midheaven and the rising sign are the 2 most usually focused on, because most people really want to know about their career, and the rising sign explains how they portray themselves. But the 10th house is kind of more focused on the career and public recognition and public persona or energy that's within a career field or within the field that they portray to the whole world in public settings or group settings. So, I do have some information in a lot of books. I usually use those if I forget anything, so pardon me. I know this is like the cheap way of explaining to you guys some information, but whatever. I'm gonna get this over with and get some basic information, and soon I'll be making more complicated videos and explaining more complicated aspects and the non-basic stuff. So, the rising sign, which is on the eastern horizon when you're born, is always on the eastern horizon. Exactly what is rising when you're born. Because of how the earth turns, everything's coming from the eastern horizon and then descending into the western horizon. So that would make this what's setting in the western horizon, and this is what's rising. So that's why it's the rising sign. In the most common type of astrology used, this line can change. All the lines can change except for these 2. These are always on the western and eastern horizon. You may see in your chart certain houses that are bigger and certain houses that are smaller. Generally, this doesn't mean really anything unless there's a lot of planets in those houses that are bigger and smaller. I have my biggest houses are actually there's no planets in them. And my smaller houses, there's a lot of planets in, which is just a coincidence, I guess. But so the IC is on the cusp of the 4th house, and the midheaven's on the cusp of the 10th house. My 10th house goes more towards this side of the zodiac. It's kind of leaned towards this way, and that means this would be leaned towards this way. This line always has to be straight. So it's going towards this way, and this is going towards that way. I'm going to give you a simple explanation of each house, and then from there we can move on and talk about more things. Just a second. Okay. The zodiac consists of 12 sections of the sky, each section being one of the astrological signs. Each sign is a special field of energy. There are also 12 sections or houses of the horoscope, and as we saw in the previous chapter, each house is ruled by one of the astrological signs. The sign that rules a house in a given horoscope is determined by the rising sign, which rules the 1st house. Yes, so generally if you have whatever your rising sign is, the opposite sign will be your falling sign. So whatever whatever sign rules whatever house, the opposite house will rule the opposite sign, and it goes in a circle. You could say that this is a fixed point in the sky, or you could say the signs are fixed. But whichever one you say is fixed, that means the other one's kind of turning and turning and turning. And then the moment you're born, that's where your planets, or that's where your houses line up with your signs. Now, basically the lines that I put here, the rising sign, whatever sign falls within that line would generally be the sign that rules your first house. And some people, I think in this, it didn't explain well, but in this book it's trying to explain how your whole chart could be ruled by your rising sign. Basically. Your rising sign actually really is very powerful, because that's the most powerful. Like, it affects your personality. And it really strengthens that sign, and it also strengthens the planet that rules that sign, no matter if it's in the first house or not. So if rising and Aries are very compatible, because the first house rules Aries, and Aries is all about personality. Aries think about personality a lot. So if you had Aries there and there was Mars somewhere in your chart, that would strengthen that part of your chart. Well, yeah, it would be more emphasized. So that means your first house would be tied to the other house and the other sign where the planet that rules that sign is in. The function of each house is to direct the energy of the sign that rules it. In other words, the house indicates where the energy of the sign will be used. Yes, so everyone has all 12 signs in their chart. But then how we express those signs is shown by which house that they fall in. So I have Aquarius rising. So that means my Aquarius energy is stronger because I can express it in my personality, which would make me quirky, the opposite of egocentric, egalitarian, future forward thinking, different, unique, eccentric, detached, slightly less emotional than most people, maybe strict when it comes to certain things, contradictory, some people might say, but not hypocritical. There's a lot of contradictory signs, or rather, two-sided signs. Aquarius has its symbol is actually two separate things, which generally means a dual sign. Aquarius is less dual than Gemini or Pisces. But there's two distinct parts of Aquarius, the intellectual and emotional, and the emotional is very submerged in the Aquarius thought process. So that's how I would express in my life Aquarius. Whereas the first 3 houses are very personal. The next 3 are more focused on your life and what you do in your life, kind of how you plan out your life. The next 3 are to do with marriage and other people and your significant other. And the next 3 have a lot to do with the world at large and your career. And it's less egocentric and personal, but it's more on social recognition. So this book, the book that I'm reading, and a lot of books that really explain this, focus on how each house connects with a certain part of life, and that it's kind of like a stage, and each house or sign rules a particular energy in that stage. I mean, each sign, I guess you could say, is an actor, and each house, you could say, is a set. The water signs might be near the water, I guess, but Cancer might be in someone's house, like in your house. A Gemini might be playing or joking around with someone. Taurus might be in the grass, relaxing, planning its life in the most careful way. Aries might show a child just learning about its ego. Capricorn would be at a career or at someone's job, climbing the social ladder. And each house is correlated with that. Now, if you have Aries in the first house, then you have a very good chart. It flows very well. And you're most likely to have Taurus in the second, Gemini in the third, and every sign would be compatible with its house. Whereas if you have Libra in the first house, every sign would be opposite its natural house. And some people say that Libra risings have a tough life. They're very charming people. They have to make up for that charmingness because their lives tend to be difficult in a sense. And they really find balance by the end of their life because of that. And whereas an Aries may not find balance because there's just so much energy in every single one of their houses. So the first house that in this book, it explains that there's no scenery, there's nothing extraneous, it's just a person. One person, the beginning of life. It's kind of like your rising sign is you without anyone else to react to you. It's your automatic action. It's not reaction, it's your automatic, how you automatically perceive the world without anything going back at you and without you reacting. You automatically act like your rising sign. Whereas your moon sign is how you react to the physical world and other people. And your sun sign is actually who you are underneath everything, despite your incarnation into this world. The second house rules money and possessions. It's how you get along in this world and use your resources to sustain yourself. The third house is communication. It's the local environment. It's your brothers and sisters. It's the first people that you encounter in life and learn how to speak with. There can be a lot of trickery here. You learn sarcasm and you learn basic communication and language. And each house could be an aspect of your life or the stages of your life. The first house would be birth. Second is getting possessions and becoming aware of your body and knowing how it works in order to function and sustain yourself. The third house would be your mind and your communication and your first words. The fourth house is also kind of a babyish house. It kind of represents vulnerability and emotions and neediness. It represents your home, and at this point in your life you become very vulnerable to what kind of home that you're comfortable in. It's the domestic environment. And there's a lot of relatives, and it's relatives that you love and you develop an attachment to. The fifth house is correlated with the party scene. It's when you start to really grow your ego and start to accept that your birthdays are a time of celebration. And there's games, arts, crafts, carnivals, circuses here. Whatever planets are in here show how you enjoy yourself. And this can really improve your life or deteriorate it, or just put obstacles because of how this is the house of enjoyment. And if you have a Saturn in this house, you may have a lot of obstacles before you enjoy yourself in life. The sixth house is when you begin to really focus on the details of maintaining yourself. This is the house of health, and the health food store, drugs, barbershop, and beauty salon. So maintaining your, not aesthetic in a sense, more personal hygiene. And it's also to do with pets, physical fitness, and your first few jobs before you enter your true career, and the people that work at your job, or the people that are around you when you're maintaining yourself. The seventh house is marriage. And no, I mean marriage in the traditional sense, not love. The fifth house would rule love or affairs. The seventh house actually rules people that have qualities that you lack, and vice versa. It rules wedding ceremonies. It's the opposite of your first house, so it makes sense. It's kind of like a karma feeling. It's the way of the universe balancing out your life. It's recommended, and it usually happens that people tend to marry people that have their charts kind of reversed, and the seventh house shows this kind of information. If you have the sun in the seventh house, it would make sense for you to marry or be around people in order to learn and balance yourself that are strong Leos or have a strong sun in their chart. So maybe a sun on the ascendant. The eighth house rules sex, death, taxes, basically all the inevitabilities and finalities of life. And it also rules non-material assets, whereas the second house rules material. The 8th house really forces you to accept what is important in your life because of the realization that you're going to die. It's mortality. It's also joint income. This is after the 7th house, so it's the money of a marriage couple together. And these 8th houses of both these people can really show whether or not they get along in their money and how they spend together. It's how love alters how you see money. It's how your marriage changes how you see money. It's also a house of debts, resourcefulness, talent, hidden talents, intuition, and a few other things, and regeneration. The 9th house is after death. It rules religion. It's how you rise from the dead. It's your joie de vivre, in a sense that's less material. It rules your community in a religious sense, a spiritual sense. It rules the theater, the zoo, cathedrals, universities. It's higher learning. It's the most highest kind of learning. It's the opposite of the 3rd. So the 3rd house is like basic learning, and the 9th house is taking that learning and mixing it with everything else in life, and then learning from that. It's philosophy. The 8th house is more psychology, and the 9th house rules philosophy. It's higher communication. It's actually, the 3rd house is traveling around your community. The 9th house is traveling around the world. It's more optimistic. It's about expansion and growth, whereas the 3rd house is about details and focusing on the little aspects of life. The 9th house is about expansion and growth. Just like Sagittarius rules the 9th and Gemini rules the 3rd. These are things that they tend to be interested in. The 10th house is the career. It's the very top point of someone's life. It's the pinnacle of why you're here, and everything that, all the energy that joins together, and what you tend to be good at, and what you have innate interest in, and what you usually go after. It's your destiny. It's reputation, public position. It's the top of a mountain. It's the part of your life where you're probably at your prime, in a sense, and then from then on you start to fall. But once you reach that prime, you basically, someone with a good 10th house would attain a good background in life, and they would build foundation for them to rest upon. So the good 10th house is ruled by Capricorn. Well, Capricorn rules the 10th house, and I have Mars in the 10th house, so me personally, I put a lot of my physical energy into public recognition, or I should, and public recognition and my career. It makes sense that a career focus would be the 10th house. It's also kind of the family. It's the father role, and some people say the mother role, but it tends to be the career-related part of the family. It's very integral to how family runs, but it's less domestic and more career-driven. The 11th house rules what's after the 10th house. What's behind the 10th house? Why would you want a career like this? It's your hopes and dreams. So the 10th house may tell you what you are going to have a career in, but the 11th house would be like, is this what you really want? It's aspirations. It's ruled by Aquarius, and Aquarius is very kind of idealistic about the world, but more realistic so. So the 11th house takes the realistic hopes and dreams and wishes of the whole world and kind of focuses on what you can contribute to that and what the world can bring back to you. It rules karma. It rules another aspect of destiny. It's more public, and it focuses on organizations and social activities and friends and distant relatives. The 5th house is children, and the 11th house may be your ancestors and your karma and what you deserve in this life after you've done your career and after you've worked hard. it's the rewards that come after a profession, which makes sense because the first house rules personality, and the second house rules money, your automatic money after you're born. And the 10th house rules your personality when you're in a career, and the 11th house rules the money and rewards that you get from that career. And as the 7th house is marriage, the 8th house is money that you get from that marriage. So the 4th house is being at home, and the 5th house is kind of what you enjoy at your home and what you enjoy in your leisure time. Because at home you can be in your leisure time because it's the opposite of career. And the 5th house is the enjoyment that comes from your leisure time and spending time with your family and your children and romanticism. And the last house is the 12th house. The 12th house is very mysterious. So most people say it's very negative, and it does rule solitude, but it's very, very spiritual. The mutable houses, 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 10th, are communication. 3rd is with your siblings and basic communication. 6th is communication with your body. 9th is communication with and learning about ethics. The 12th house is more spiritual. The 9th house is spiritual, but the 12th house is actually completely separate from the physical world, and it rules the very ending of everything. It's the complete integration of all the 12 houses and unity of everything. It's a psychic house. It rules prisons because it represents humans are almost incapable of withstanding the 12th house because it's so extreme, and it's very disconnected with the physical world, and it's kind of very disconnected with the mind, and it's more connected with the soul. It rules hidden messages, subconscious mind, resentment, disappointment. And it only rules these things because only once we become spiritually aware and spiritually evolved can we withstand all these negative things in life, like solitude, disappointment, death, complete destruction, alcoholism, but after that, after we've mastered that, it rules hidden power and psychic energy, which is ultimately the most powerful thing in the universe.